I wanted to start a message. And we are currently in a series called What Would Jesus Undo? What would Jesus undo? So WWJU. And you might be familiar with what would Jesus do? The phrase that was very popular among, Christian communities and churches a few years back, and there was all kinds of like bracelets and a movie and so on. And the idea of it is that if you're in a certain situation, you can ask, what would Jesus do? It's to remind you to try and act like Jesus, to be like Jesus. And it's an important thing, and it's something that was pretty good to kind of think about. But we also think that it's quite important, not just what would Jesus do, but what would Jesus undo? What would Jesus undo in our lives? What do we have? What are we doing that Jesus would undo so that we can be more like Him and that we can please God the Father? So in the first week, we spoke about indifference, that Jesus would undo indifference. And the subtitle for that message was Worship is Purposeful. And the reason for why Jesus would undo indifference is that there is no way that you can worship indifferently. Worship is purposeful. There has to be a purpose to it. You have to be determined to do it. It's not just, I'll worship today. You could just come to church, but you're there and you're like, no. No, worship is not just the songs here, but worship is purposeful. We have to be determined, and we have to want and have that desire and the passion to worship God wherever we are and in whatever we do. In week 2, we spoke about how Jesus would undo hollow worship, because worship is deeper than just the surface. That worship is much more than the lifting of our hands, or the singing of our voices, or us playing instruments, or us being in the church. But it goes so much deeper than that. It goes down to our core. It goes down to our soul and our spirit. And it's about what's inside more than what's on the outside. But on the inside, whatever is on the inside will be expressed outwardly. And we spoke about how a few people have different expressions of whatever is inside. But that a few people confuse the outside worship, the superficial worship, for true worship, which is in the inside. And a lot of people worship on the outside, but on the inside, they don't care about God. And so Jesus would undo indifference. Jesus would undo hollow worship. And today, we're going to talk about, I think Jesus wouldn't do a lot of things, but I think this is one of the most important ones. I know it's my week and all that, but I think that, I don't know, I was just looking at this and I'm like, this is really important. Because Jesus would undo hypocrisy. Jesus would undo hypocrisy. Hypocrisy, it's kind of a funny thing, because it's very easy to spot a hypocrite, right? If I was to ask you guys to lift your hands if you know a hypocrite in your life, someone who acts a bit hypocritical, y'all will probably kind of think of one, maybe two people, or even more, right? It might even be the person sitting next to you. I don't know. So you might be thinking of that. But then if I was to ask them to lift your hands, if you are a hypocrite, I'd say very few people, if anyone, would lift their hands up. But here's the thing. If everyone is a hypocrite, and no one is a hypocrite, there's something wrong. And so hypocrisy is a funny thing in that sense, is that it is very easy to spot it in other people, but it's very hard to spot it in yourself. And hypocrisy is quite an important thing for us to address, because it is, I think it's the number one, but it's among the top anyway, chief complaints that non-Christians have about Christians. About people in the world have about people in the church. You've heard it before. What do they say? Well, I'm not going to go to church because they are just a bunch of hypocrites. Just a bunch of hypocrites in there. That they pretend to be these people that are somewhat superior, or that they are so holy and they go to church and they follow God and they pray. But I know many of them, and they're no better than my neighbor who goes to like some satanic church, I don't know. So many people, they walk away from God and they walk away from the church because of hypocrisy in the lives of Christians. And that is very detrimental to God and to church. When all you do is you act holy and you act like you're so much better and that you got it all together and that you're this good, solid Christian. And when you act like that and people see it and they perceive you like that, when you do sin and you sin publicly and you sin in an ugly way, it is so much worse to the people who are watching you and who had that perception that you were better. Because sure, aren't you meant to be better? And because of that perception that you set across, that you set to them, they now become disappointed, disillusioned with, well, what's the point of this God thing? What's the point of this church thing? And I think I could say that I experienced this in some way with my parents growing up. Because technically I've been growing up in the church, since I was like a little baby, And not that I was a Christian, but my parents always took me to church. And my parents went to church. But when we got home, it wasn't really what we saw in church or what we learned in church. Our experiences, my experience with my parents and what we saw was not what the Bible preached. And thankfully, things have changed, and I know that they've truly transformed, and today they're your pastors. But at the time when I was growing up, that wasn't the case. And what if I had truly become disillusioned and disappointed with their actions? That could have easily driven me away from God and the church. And this happens all the time, not just within families, but with friends and everything like that. And it comes because of hypocrisy. And hypocrisy is a horrible sin, not just because it is a sin, but because it drives people away from God. And that makes it so much worse. A guy named Brennan Manning, he said this, and I really like it. We'll put it up on the thing. He said, the single greatest cause of atheism in the world today is Christians who acknowledge Jesus with their lips, then walk out the door and deny him with their lifestyle. That is what an unbelieving world simply finds unbelievable. That is what an unbelieving world finds unbelievable. And so for us to understand hypocrisy, I would like to first take what hypocrisy is not. Because I think sometimes we can have a certain misconception. Hypocrisy is not the disparity between what we do and what we wish we did. It's not the difference between what I didn't do, but I wish I did. Or it's not the difference between what I wish I didn't think, or the thoughts I didn't want to have, but I did. That's called sin. That is you missing the mark. That's what literally sin is. You have the mark, you have the standard set by God, and you wish that you could get to it, but you miss the mark. That is sin. That is when we fall short of the glory of God. So hypocrisy is not that. That is sin. Hypocrisy is the gap between what we show and who we are. It's the difference between what we say and how we live. It's the difference between the public persona and the private character. It's what we show to other people and who we truly are. And when Jesus is talking about hypocrisy, and when he's calling other people hypocrites in the Bible, the word he uses is hypocritus. And it even sounds like a hypocrite. And hypocritus at the time was seen, the word literally meant an actor or someone who's on stage, as someone who hides behind a mask. And that mask, you might have seen this in ancient Greece, is that when they started doing plays, a way for people to kind of pretend that they were somebody else, or a way that they could perceive to have certain different emotions, is they would use those masks. And those masks that you might be familiar with, they're all kind of like white, and they're kind of weird and kind of creepy nowadays. But they would have these different masks. And a mask would have maybe different emotions. So some of them were like really happy, and to us we see today is a bit like creepy, but they were happy. And so they would put on the mask, and all of a sudden this actor that's on stage, whatever his current situation is, he puts on the mask and he's now the happy hypocrite. The happy hypocrite. And nowadays we we can have pretty much the same, right? The happy hypocrites. It's the guys that would be at the door and they say, "Peace of the Lord. Oh, Lord, God bless you. God is good all the time. I am praying for you." All the time, they hate you. And they're talking behind your back. Can you believe what she's wearing today? She wore that to church? That is no way. I would never, ever wear that. Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. Or maybe then you have the guys that would put on a mask and it's a bit angrier now. You get the angry hypocrite. And nowadays we have the angry hypocrites. There'd be the people kind of sitting and looking at people and be like, "You can't do that. What you're doing? No, you cannot possibly do that. You shouldn't be doing that. Can you believe what that person did? I cannot believe this. Oh my gosh, did you hear? No way. I knew it. I knew they weren't good from the very start. I knew it. And they do this all the while they have despicable sin in their own lives. And they would look at others. And they would put on the mask and pretend that they themselves are better than the other person. And one of the great definitions in the Bible for a hypocrite, I think, comes from courtesy of Paul. And it's in the letter to Titus. And it's in chapter 1, verse 16. And it says, "They claim to know God, but by their actions they deny Him. They are detestable, disobedient, and unfit for doing anything good." They claim to know God. They say that they know God. They say that they believe in God. But who they truly are denies Him, denies God. Their actions, who they truly are, is far away from God. And in the times of Jesus, it was the Pharisees that were seen a lot of times hypocritical. And we see this constant back and forth. We're going to have a look at it in just a second. We see this thing where Jesus is talking about the Pharisees. And the Pharisees had a lot of hypocritical worship and actions. One of them was they would give. They would be very generous. They would give money to other people. But they would give to be seen. You know? So they wouldn't just give it in secret or just when nobody's around. No. They gotta get a crowd. And if they were to go and give €1,000, they would give it in 20-cent coins. Just to make sure that it's the big bag and that people know that I am really, really generous. Look at this, people. I am giving money to the widow and the poor people and all those that are sick. Look at me. I am so generous. And another thing that they would do is they would fast. But they would fast in a way that people really knew that they were fasting. So, they would put on a sad face. And they would kind of hunch over. And they would walk in the streets very weak. Oh, I'm fasting. Somebody would walk past. This is a Pharisee. It's an important person. "Are you okay?" "Yes, I'm just fasting. Haven't eaten anything in 30 days. You know how it is. I'm just getting a little bit holier. I'm nearer to God with this fasting, "Oh, wow, that's impressive. That's so impressive. I would never be able to do that." I know, but I can." Or the other thing that they would do is they would be praying, but they'd be praying to be heard. So they wouldn't pray in just their private homes or just by themselves or in this, because prayer is a conversation between them and God. They wouldn't do that. They would sit at the street corners and they would make this big show and they'd be like, "God," and they would pray out to Him and they would use all these fancy words and all these crazy prayers that would impress people who were hearing, and they would make sure that they would scream it out so that everybody can hear, and that people would gather and be like, "Wow, this person, he's a great religious leader. Look at him. I don't understand half of what he's saying, but I'm amazed because it must be something really, really good." And so they would do all of these things, which Jesus then criticizes. But the thing is, we can do the same in church today. You know, sometimes what we can do is we can lift our hands, during worship, or we go down to our knees, or we're shouting, and oh God, and we make sure that we sit in the front row, because then we know that everybody is going to see how amazing and how holy we are, and we do all these things. When I was growing up, there was this woman, when I was a child, and I'm hoping that I'm recalling this correctly. But I remember that like every time during worship in church, when I was a kid, there was this woman. And all she would do is she'd kneel down and she'd be like, and she would shout like this over and over and over again. And in church, we had really high ceilings. So there was like this big echo. And so everybody heard what she was screaming. And every time, like, I would come in, man, as a child, you're just like, what is going on? Does God not hear you if you don't shout that loud? You know what I mean? And I'm not saying that, everybody has their way of expressing themselves. And it doesn't mean that what we do in lifting our hands and stuff like that is not genuine. The problem is when we do it to put on a show. When we do it just because people are around. When we do it, when we are in private, we don't do it. Because I know, I didn't even mention this yesterday, but so you guys are the special crowd, all right? You're getting a little bit more of the preaching. I remember that Pastor Paulo, when he was here, he's really expressive, and he's really quite loud and stuff like that. But I also knew him in private because I lived with him. And he would do the exact same thing at home. It was even a problem. The neighbor would come over because, can you please pray a little bit, a little lower because you're waking up people, He would be just as passionate at home as he was here on stage. But the problem is, if you are really honest with yourself, sometimes do you find yourself doing things just because you're in church or because you are genuinely worshiping God? Other things that we can do is we can come to church and we can say peace of the Lord. I mentioned this already. We can say peace of the Lord to people, and all the while we hate him, or there's something going on and we're kind of fighting with each other, or that person hurt you. But just because you're in church, you got to be nice and you got to play along. So, hi, brother. It's so nice to see you. God bless you. Or we can even come up here and we can sing at the top of our lungs. We can be part of the worship group. We can be the preacher. And we could do all this show and everything seems right when inside we're rotten to the core. We can project that we have this wonderful life with God. Look at me, I'm so connected to God. I'm so in tune. I pray like every day, 3 hours a day. When really we are broken and losing our faith in a God that seems so distant. And Jesus never spoke more harshly than to hypocrites. And we see he has really harsh words for hypocrites in the Bible. Let's read in Matthew chapter 23, verse 27. It says this: "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You are like whitewashed tombs, which look beautiful on the outside, but on the inside are full of the bones of the dead and everything unclean. In the same way, on the outside you appear to people as righteous, but on the inside you are full of hypocrisy and wickedness." Let's jump to verse 33, and he says, "You snakes, you brood of vipers, how will you escape being condemned to hell?" How will you escape being condemned to hell? You see, hypocrites, they want to look good on the outside while being dirty on the inside. They want the illusion of a public virtue while hiding their private vices. But look in this passage and see that Jesus doesn't say, "Woe to you who lie. Woe to you, adulterers. Woe to you, those who make mistakes. Woe to you who taught those things last night. Woe to you who are imperfect." He doesn't say that. He says, "Woe to you who pretend not to be imperfect." who pretend to have it all together. And it's almost a cliche for me to mention this. There's just no way you can have a preaching about hypocrisy without mentioning social media, where the age that we live in today, social media has really enabled us to be more hypocritical. Because you live in this world where you get to filter out anything that is bad and only show what is good. And only project to other people what you want them to see. And in your life, everybody's life, no matter how good you think another person's life is, in everybody's life, there are dirty, broken pieces. And they struggle, and it's not easy, some more than others, but every single person. However, today, we get to just hide that under the carpet. We get to crop that out of the picture so that people don't really see what is going on. And we project that onto people in social networks so that we can appear to be somebody that we are not. Or we can appear to live a life that we are not living. Or that we can appear to be in a certain situation that we are not. And so you have people, for example, who would post, oh, I love my husband so much. Thank you, hubby. Breakfast in bed once again. You're the best. Post them on the wall. I love you, babes. And then he likes and hearts. And then it's like, I love you too, babe. All the while, they haven't slept in the same bed in months and are heading for divorce. Or you get the people who post, guys, my devotional, and they put the Bible, you got to have the Bible. That is really only opened up, just for the picture because we use phones anyway nowadays. And they have the mug because you got to have the coffee mug, okay? There's no devotional without the coffee mug. And so they put the coffee mug and they put the Bible and it looks all really pretty. And then they go and they take the picture. Guys, my devotional. God is good all the time. He is good. Having time with the Lord, Praise Him. All the while, the reality is that you took more time to take that picture than you took it in the devotional. Or you just have those people. Everything is great, people. Everything is great. Look at me, I'm on holidays. Look at me, new car. Check out my new ride. Everything is great. Everything is great. And all the time, and all the while, they are broken and sad and lonely and empty. And so I wanted to kind of explore a bit more on this hypocrisy because we see it a lot today and we are guilty of it. And so I was questioning myself, what drives hypocrisy? What leads us to do that, to act in that hypocrite way as an actor on the stage? And I think I came to a good conclusion. I think what drives hypocrisy is fear. The fear of what others may think if you don't project that everything is all right. Because sure, everybody is projecting that everything is all right. When everybody is posting up things and they look good and stuff like that, if you are not doing the same, you don't want to be the one out. Surely there's something wrong with you if you are not having the same life that other people are having. What would other people think if I was to actually project the real me and the real life? It would be so much different than everybody else. It's the fear of rejection of other people when they think that you are not enough, that you just don't have enough, or that you don't do enough, or that you aren't pretty enough. It's the fear of losing the admiration of people who look up to you. This is especially true for leaders, for pastors, for example. What would happen as a pastor? They need to see that I am holy and that I am right and I got it all together. Because what would happen if they were to actually see the true me and the real me and the guy that sometimes doesn't have all the answers because we want to act like we know it and we don't struggle with this faith with God and that we have this thing, but we can't let people see that because what would happen then? Well, would people stop looking up to us? Would people just leave the church? What would happen then? It's the fear of facing who we truly are if we drop the mask. It's the fear of facing the fact that maybe we're not as good or great as we think we are. And what is at the essence of hypocrisy? It is lying. It is lying. So that we don't face these fears, we lie. We lie to others about ourselves, about our lives. We lie to others. And most importantly, we lie to ourselves. And we lie to ourselves over and over again until we believe the lie. I really want to preach a message on this so bad. Said it in the small groups, and I've been saying to a few people, I have the title of the message, and everybody knows that it's a preacher rule, right? When you got the title down, even before you got the message is automatically great, all right? So I really want to preach this message. But we're with this message, so I'm just going to give you a little bit of a sneak peek. What I want to talk about is that our minds are incredible at adapting to certain circumstances or certain environments. The human brain is something that is, to me anyway, it's very fascinating, and I'm quite interested by neuroscience and psychology. In my top 5 of careers, a psychologist would have been quite high up if I didn't go for software engineering. And because I'm quite interested by it, I do read a few books on it and watch a few videos and so on. And there's this theory in psychology that is called the hedonic treadmill. The hedonic treadmill is a theory that states that no matter how good or how bad your life gets, there's always a baseline of happiness and satisfaction that you'll always go back to. So the graph for the hedonic treadmill kind of looks like a graph that goes up and down. It's kind of like this. It just goes up and down, up and down. And right through those up and downs, there's a line that cuts right across the ups and the downs. And the line that cuts across is your basic level of satisfaction. And what it states is that no matter how good your life gets, no matter how many dreams you achieve, no matter how many cars you get, and the boats, and the girls, and whatever you want in your life, if you could have anything in this life, and if, for example, God were to act like a genie, and God would just give you everything, and He would, anything you wanted, any food that you wanted, any experience that you wanted, you would just get it. No matter how much of that, and no matter how high your curve gets, eventually, the fun, the excitement, it fades away. And you go back down into your basic level of happiness and satisfaction. And all of a sudden, that new car it's not really as exciting anymore. Sure, it's great, but it's not really exciting. And that house that you always dreamt of, and then you got it, now you're seeing its flaws, and it's just not as great and stuff like that. And it's the same thing for when your life gets bad. When things aren't going as you expected, when all of a sudden you're faced with a real difficulty, when for example, I'm a bit fascinated by this, and I don't know if you guys are too, when you look at people in certain countries of Africa where you know that they barely have anything to eat, but they are happy. Why? Because if I were to snap my fingers and all of a sudden there's barely any food for any of us, we would be really distraught. We would be like, oh my gosh, like this is terrible and stuff like that. But eventually, your mind and your body adapts to your situation, and you go back, and if all you can remember really is not having enough food, you just become used to that. And a real big evidence for this is that we all live like kings and queens, and yet we're all dissatisfied with what we have. If you look back at the last 2,000-3,000 years, there has been no king or queen who's ever lived as well as any of us. And yet, we're not satisfied. And in this thing, for example, depression would come with your mind's inability to go back up in the hedonic treadmill. In that you're stuck in that loop of just not being able to be satisfied or happy anymore, that there's something blocking it. And why did I mention this theory? Because I think it's linked with our hypocritical actions. And because when our minds find themselves in front of difficult situations, when your graph is going down, right? We do all kinds of things to get back up. Subconsciously, your mind is going to try, okay, our life is bad. We got to do something about this because this is not a good way to be. I don't want to be uncomfortable. I don't want to be sad. We got to do something about this, right? So your brain does whatever it needs to do. And one of the easiest ways for your brain to go back up is for your brain to lie to itself. It's for you to lie to yourself. And all of a sudden, you are seen minimizing certain problems, certain experiences, certain traumas, certain sin. We just start minimizing it so that we can begin to feel more comfortable with that. And so we leave stuff aside, stuff that should not be in our lives, stuff that should be dealt with, just so that we can feel a little bit better, just so we can feel comfortable and we can go back up to our basic level of satisfaction. And we see in the most gruesome of sins, like rape, that we would look at that and we would be horrified by it, but that people still do it. And why do they do it? And how does it come to that point? Well, we know from looking at actual rapists that it doesn't start with simply a rape, but it starts with something small, and then you leave it aside, and you become comfortable with that. And maybe you were feeling a bit weird and guilty that you'd done that thing, but it was something small, and all of a sudden next time, you were already comfortable with that, so you do something else, and something else, and something else, and something else, and it builds up. And all of a sudden, you're a person who your past self would not even recognize. And so it's very easy for us to lie to ourselves, to try and rationalize our sin, to try and rationalize our situation, instead of actually dealing with it. Because if we were to actually have to, the reason why we're so hypocritical is because if we weren't, we would actually have to deal with finding out who we truly are and the things that are truly in our lives, and that maybe perhaps we're not as good or as well or as comfortable or as happy as we think we are. And so we project this life onto others because it would mean being vulnerable. It means that we would actually have to deal with those experiences, that we would actually have to deal with the problems in our lives. We would have to face the fact that the sin that we have, that we say that it's fine because we rationalize it, because people are reading the Bible out of context, and if you actually read it in context, then it's not really a sin, and that maybe Jesus never said it, so then if Jesus didn't say it, it's okay, so I'm just going to keep doing it because I'm okay, and as long as I'm happy and I'm not hurting anybody, then that is okay. We would have to face the fact that we do indeed have problems in our relationship, and that we've been just putting to the side, and we've just been saying, no, it's okay. And we've been going bit by bit, and it's getting worse. But we don't really want to deal with that. So we just want to say, no, it's fine. But if we were to actually stop being hypocritical and stop lying to ourselves, we would actually have to know that no, this relationship does need work. This relationship does need to get better, and it does need to be fixed. And yes, it does take work, and yes, it may hurt. But in the end, it is worth it. We would have to face the fact that it isn't really people's fault, that maybe I don't have the job that I wanted, or the career that I wanted, or the studies that I wanted, or the car that I wanted, or the house that I wanted. Maybe it's not other people's fault, but maybe it's your own, that it is your responsibility, that it's not the government's fault, and it's not the country that you were born in, or it's not the parents that you were born with, but that we all have difficulties and we have to come up out of them. Or maybe you would have to face the fact that we're a despicable sinner, just like everybody else. And that if it wasn't for the grace of God, we would be miles off getting into heaven. You know, what was the famous words that Jesus said about worship? He said, you will worship me in spirit and in truth. In spirit and in truth. What is hypocrisy? A lie. So worship in spirit and in truth requires truth. It requires ourselves to be truthful with ourselves, to be truthful with God, and to be truthful with others. This is why you cannot worship God as a hypocrite. You cannot worship God with a mask in your face. You cannot worship God pretending that you're somebody that you're not. But you can only worship God when you recognize who you truly are, when you recognize your broken pieces so that God can make you whole. You cannot worship God pretending to be someone that you are not. You see, God, He knows you better than you even know yourself. I am amazed by this because I don't understand myself. Sometimes I think back on something that I did and I'm like, why did I do this? Or why am I feeling this way? I don't really understand what is going on. And it amazes me that God does. And I'm asking God for some clues, like, God, can you help me out here? I just want to understand myself. And you're trying to hide things that God already sees. And you've been trying to be greater or better or to pretend that you are okay when God already accepts you the way you are. Not the way with your mask and everything, but the guy, the person behind the mask. And I know that it's hard to face the fear and that you can't just do it all at once. But God says this in 2 Timothy 1:7. He says, "For God gave us a spirit not of fear, but of power and love and self-control." His spirit that He gives us is not a fearful spirit, it's not a timid spirit, but it's of power and love and of self-control. But then how? How do we do that? And I want to tell you that there is hope. Hope for the hypocrite. And we see this in Matthew chapter 23, verse 25. Jesus continues his woes to the Pharisees, and He says this. "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence. Blind Pharisee, first clean the inside of the cup and dish, and then the outside also will be clean." Now, right now, you're probably amazed. And you're probably amazed due to the fact that you never thought, I mean, the Bible has all the answers, but you never thought that the Bible would teach you how to wash the dishes. But in all seriousness, this washing the dishes that Jesus is talking about goes so much deeper than that. Because this is the hope for the hypocrite. See, Jesus says, first, clean the inside of the cup and dish, and then the outside would also be clean. So what is He saying? First, let the Spirit of God work within you, so that then the outside. So you must be vulnerable with Him first, and face the fear, and be of being vulnerable, and being truthful, and just being transparent with Him. You must first be vulnerable, so that then the outside can be clean. And hypocrisy, it works, it generates a darkness so that other people don't see who we truly are. And what works in darkness? It is sin. And as you continue to try and hide things, you're putting yourself in a vulnerable space for more sin. And in Proverbs 28:13, the Bible says this. It says, "Whoever conceals their sins does not prosper, but the one who confesses and renounces them finds mercy." We live our lives in lies, and nothing changes. We just go on. And through the hedonic treadmill, we just go back to a level of satisfaction. We're okay, but nothing really changes. We do this so that we're happy or comfortable. Because the moment that you let the mask fall off and see who you truly are is the moment that you would have to take responsibility to do something about it. And so we do this, we say, no, it's fine, and we ignore it because then we don't actually have to deal with it. But change starts when the mask falls off. Change starts. The one who finds mercy is the one who lets the mask fall off. You know, there's one thing that I've been hoping and I'm reminding myself to be. Because I think a while ago, I really struggled with I was very serious, or that I don't let anybody in. And in a way, I think I'm somewhat like that. But I need to remind myself of this. I need to remind myself that I would rather be an honest sinner than a lying hypocrite. I would rather be honest and open and tell people and show people that I am not any way greater or better or holier. I would rather show them that I am truly a sinner, but an honest sinner, than a lying hypocrite. Jesus has zero tolerance for hypocrisy, but he has unlimited grace for a sinner in need of forgiveness. He hates those who pretend they are better and perfect. He has no tolerance for the show and for the things that you put on. He has no tolerance for the filters. He has no tolerance for the cropping. But for those that recognize they are broken, he gives grace. People ask Jesus, Jesus, why do you sit and eat with sinners? What did Jesus say? He said, it is not the healthy that need a doctor. What was he saying? He wasn't saying to them, oh no, you guys are okay. You guys are perfect. Don't worry about it. Because we know that the Pharisees, teachers of the law, they're hypocrites. They're sinful. They're wicked. But what he was saying is this. The people who are sitting here at my table, the ones that I'm eating with, they've recognized. They let the mask fall off. They are truthful with me. Everybody knows that they are sinners. Everybody rejects them. Everybody looks down on them. But at least they are truthful. And because they are truthful, because they have come to me as they are, as sick people, the doctor of doctors is going to work in them. And so as you pretend that you're okay, then you're pretending that you're healthy. And it's only when you recognize that you're not, that the doctor comes in and he does what the doctor of doctors does. And so pray this like David did. He said, search me, God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. Search me, God. Go through the mask. Go through the lies. Go through the walls that I put out around me so that people can't really see what is going on. Search me, God. Get to know me. Work within me. Change me. Lead me to face the things that I need to face. So what is hypocrisy? It is the gap between what we show and who we are. And we don't close that gap with perfection. We close the gap with Christ. We don't close the gap with outward actions. We close the gap by allowing Jesus into the broken areas of our lives. And here's an advice. Stop trying to be a good Christian, because we aren't good. What did Jesus say? There is none but good but God, the Father. Instead of trying to be a good Christian, I put this in quotes, good Christian, spend time with the one who is good, and that is Jesus. Because time with Him is a transformative time. Time with Him requires vulnerability, requires openness. When you spend time with Him, then He can begin to work within you. And when you spend time with Him, that is your true worship. When you spend time with Him, you can finally connect. Whether it be through song, or you're just at home, or you're just in prayer, or you're just driving, or whatever. When you're open with Him, and when you tear down the wall of hypocrisy, that's when your true worship begins. That is when you can give yourself away. That's when you can be truthful with Him. That's when you can rely on Him. That's when you can tell Him, God, work in me. And we always want to worship like everything is good. And we all want to just do our little habits. Whatever way you like to worship, we just want to keep doing it. But worship requires openness, vulnerability. Today, drop the mask. Drop the mask. And let yourself, your true self, encounter God in a way that maybe you've never encountered before. Maybe you've never let the mask drop. Maybe you let a few, but never your true self. And only when you truly get in front of Him, as you are, you will see that you will worship Him. Not just in spirit, but in truth. Who you truly are will worship Him. So let your mask fall off as you worship Him today. I want to sing Fill Me Up. I want the church to stand. And I want you to take this time to ask God to fill you up. But before He can fill you up, drop the mask. Drop what you've been hiding. Stop trying to be a good Christian, somebody who has it all together. But be real, be open, be vulnerable with Him. Because He wants that. He desires that more than anything. Because He knows who you truly are behind the mask. And He's just saying, just drop it. Just drop it, because I want to see you. I want to see you just as you are. And I want to talk to you. Not the hypocrite is you, but you. The actor behind the mask.